Hey, eighth grade, how we doing, guys? We are going to be talking to you about the development of what is going to be called the French and Indian War here in the United States, but it's known as the 7 Years' War. Pretty much everywhere else, if you go to Britain or you go to France, you go to Europe, you go to Canada, they talk about the 7 Years' War, and so that's going to be kind of what we're focusing on today. And well, not the war itself, but kind of the prelude and the things that lead up to the war taking place between Britain and France. Okay, so let's take a look at that. And I think I put this in the movie preview for you, but this is a map of what we're looking at. This map, basically, for some reason, it's not letting me share. Here we go. But this map kind of gives you an idea of what everybody is dealing with. You see where Spain is, got most of South America and what you and I would call Central and parts of Southern North America. France has a massive interior empire here. They call it Louisiana, and then up here is New France. And then the British, remember, they were the last to come to the party, and they started in the colonies out here. But because France is a growing power, they are now moving up into the Hudson Bay area. They're trying to infiltrate what is the fur trade. There is some other colonies down here, part of that triangular trade. And if you notice, these are all rather strategic colonies, primarily in the interests of trade and getting other resources and stuff. Same thing with France. They're up here. They are the masters of the fur trade. And then down here, Spain really has a lot of the gold and the silver and the mining that's going on out here. So if you kind of get an idea, here's furs, here's gold and silver, triangular trade, and then obviously tobacco, rice, things like that coming out of here, and then the fur trade competition between Britain and France. So hope that makes sense. Hope I'm not talking too fast, okay? So let's look at this stuff. There are a lot of early conflicts with France that are taking place between Britain because they are the two they're just very similar. They're the two biggest countries, the two biggest empires in the world at this time. The British and French rivalry grows because both have the same policy. They both want to expand. They're both trying to get wealthier. And remember, in mercantilism, the idea is not to increase the amount of trade with other countries. It's how much trade you can create for yourself. You have to import more than export. And it's an interesting thing because nowadays it's almost flipped. It's you want to export and sell more than you import. So it's just a different attitude. 1740s though, British fur traders begin to start building forts to protect their versions of the fur trade, and the French go in, they attack this, they drive the British out. But it really does center on the fur trade. The British are trying to go into this. It makes a lot of money. They have tobacco and rice. The French, who have all but a monopoly on the fur trade, are trying to protect, obviously, their investment. French begin to build a bunch of forts along the Ohio River. This is what they're trying to do to protect their fur trading territory, but it's also the beginning of what we would call an arms race. They're going to start building their militaries up and start building up their military presence, particularly here in North America where we have the colonies, Canada, those types of things. So the other thing you've got to look at are Indian and European relations. Native Americans were trading with the French and with the British, okay? In 1740, French troops began to raid towns along Maine and New York. The British captured the French fortress of Louisbourg up in Nova Scotia. That was a rather important trading area because it was kind of like the big port for the French at that time. It was also supposed to be impregnable. It was supposed to be unconquerable. It was supposed to be one of those things that you just can't, the Titanic wasn't supposed to sink and it sunk. Louisbourg is supposed to be a fort no one can conquer, and yet it gets conquered. And then the British do something interesting. They give Louisbourg, this unconquerable fort, back to France. This is an example of power politics. This is power projection. This is Britain telling France, we're so powerful that we don't even need your unconquerable fort that we were able to take. And not only are we able to conquer it, we're so powerful, we're going to give it back to you. So it's a power play. It's a massive power play, and it's really going to stand out in the French minds as an insult. A lot of Native Americans were helping France because France had very good Native American relationships. And we'll talk about the French and Native American relationships compared to what the British had. The French was a lot more of a collaborative relationship. They actually paid rents to Native Americans on top of the fur trade. There was all sorts of benefits to Native Americans with the French trade. Native Americans would often raid British settlements because a lot of times British settlers would move west. They'd take the farmland, or they would try and come in and get the fur trade. And frankly, they wouldn't do it with any negotiation. There would be no, hey, is it cool if we move here? There was no permission. British colonists tended to just move on to the land, and it's going to be something that Americans do later in history as well. So taking a look at this, the most powerful, and I'm going to kind of show you some stuff on the Iroquois Confederacy. This is the most powerful Native American group in the East, and it consisted of 5 major nations. There was the Mohawks, the Seneca, the Cayuga, the Onondaga, the Oneida. They're going to stay independent. They're actually going to expand. I actually kind of showed you one of the maps in the movie preview where we live would have been part of the Iroquois Confederacy. They actually had a whole bunch of territory that stretched from the Mississippi all the way up around the Great Lakes into northern parts of New York and stuff. It's real. It's one of the reasons why the French worked out trade deals and kind of tiptoed around the Native Americans is because the Iroquois Confederacy was massively powerful. And they're going to literally work out a deal with the British, but then again, kind of giving away the end of the story. After the 7 Years' War, that confederacy will no longer be found on maps anywhere. They will be considered part of the British Empire. Trouble in the colonies is massive increased settlement on the eastern seaboard starts to cause colonists to fight with other Native Americans and even between the European powers. Really, the argument is between France and Britain. You have people on the Algonquin and the Huron peoples are going to side with the French, and they're going to argue with the British settlement. The French obviously don't want the fur trade interfered with. They're going to get in arguments with the British, and it all is going to, frankly, start around here in North America. This is sometimes referred to as the first real world war. I know we talk about World War I. We'll get to it in the 20th century, but the French and Indian War is a global conflict. It will be fought in Europe. It will be fought in South America. It will be fought in North America. It'll be fought in Indonesia and the Pacific. It is a massive, massive conflict between, at the time, like I said, the 2 most powerful countries, Britain and France. So here is just kind of an idea of just to give you how Native Americans thought. Kanasatego, who was a member of the Onondaga Nation, talked about, hey, they know the land is valuable. They said white people don't think they know they're valuable, but we are sensible that the land is everlasting, and a few goods that we receive for it are soon worn out and gone. What this tells you is that the Native Americans understood the value of their property. They understood the value of the land. It wasn't just the fur trade. It was, the water, the soil, the area to live, the area that they are for future generations. So colonists and Native American relations. When you look at the Native Americans and you look at the British colonists, the American colonists, the relationship is not really that good. You had a fight called King Philip's War, which is fought for roughly a year. King Philip was a mocking name that they called for one of the Mohawk kings. They did not see them as real royalty because they thought King Charles and King George, William and Mary, that those were real royalty. And so this was something they mocked him with. And so it is fought with the Wampanoag Indians. It is kind of a sad moment because the Wampanoag are, if you remember, the same group of people that actually led and helped save the Pilgrims. And so what I want you to pick up on is that was 1620, and here we are 50 years later, and the Wampanoags, which had welcomed the Puritans in, are now fighting those people. They were led by Metacame, and like I said, that is kind of the mocking name that they called him. They called him King Philip. The colonial militia, the Indian warriors, are going to fight for roughly a year until Metacame gets killed in battle. But after this, the reason King Philip's War is important is not, it doesn't last that long. But what happens is, and what I want you to pick up on, are the alliances with our friends, the Native Americans and the British and the French. All of this is now going to be based on trade. Everything will be based on who you trade with, who you do business with, and that's who the people will begin siding with. Huron and Algonquins will ally themselves with the French, and that's a big deal because they are not as united as the other group. The Iroquois Confederacy, they are now made of the 6 tribes because the Tuscarora had actually been kicked out of South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina. They actually moved. They'd lost to the British. The irony is they left the British and they joined the Iroquois Confederacy. They actually moved north to enter Iroquois Confederacy territory, and they allied themselves, ironically, with the British. And so you start to see this deal where these people are now going to base who they're friends with on who they do business with, okay? Just kind of want to give you a quick recap. You have immigration from Great Britain. You have European demand for tobacco and rice increasing. This has led to plantation economies, introduction of slavery. We're looking at Britain and France are clashing now over resources. We just talked about King Philip's War. We will talk about the Pequot War. We will talk about Pontiac's War because all of these are causes that will take us up to the 7 Years' War. All of these things are leading us up to the big one, if you will. All right. So hope you find that information interesting. At least we will be looking at this this week and possibly in the next week because it is kind of big. It is massively important because the outcomes of this war are going to lead to the formation of a new country, which you should know. It's called the United States. Hopefully you've heard of it. So anyway, hope to see you soon. I will catch you at the Zoom. Let me know whatever questions you have about what we talked about today. And if there's anything else you're interested in so that I can kind of focus on that and share some more information on that for you in the coming days and weeks. All right. See you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.